Spent a lot of hours this week. The most overwhelmed, underpaid employee at North Shore Elder Services. At any rate, I'm Joe Berardino. I got involved in North Shore Elder Services a few years ago when I was working as a police captain in the city of Peabody here. And it seemed like 2 days I retired. It's now been 2 years. But I am now very proud to have been elected as the chairman of the board of North Shore Elder Services. Yeah, that's just so I get to go to the beer and cheer. I'm very happy to see we've got a very good attendance here today. And this is actually our 40th annual meeting, 40 years of North Shore Elder Services. We have representatives from our vendor agencies, councils on aging, healthcare organizations, and a lot of North Shore Elder Services board members, staff, and volunteers from other aging and disability and health networks across the North Shore. We're very honored to have Senator Barbara L'Italian with us today, who I've known actually for, seems like yesterday, but it's been a lot longer than yesterday. Our daughters swam competitively against each other years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago. So, yeah, well, I'm getting old, I feel those numbers escape. And it's funny how the world turns around. So our daughters are all grown up now, 24, 25, something like that. They swam against each other at 8, 9, 10 years old. I now have an 8-year-old granddaughter, so I'm back into swimming again. I was the official. I was the guy that used to DQ them all the time. They would cry to their parents. Yeah, you laugh. So I'm very happy to have Senator L'Italian here. She does a wonderful job with the legislation, and particularly for the elder services of our area. So I'm very happy to be here. Paul Zinkos, our executive director, will introduce Barbara shortly. He has much more to say about her than I do. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Paul right now. He wants me to make I have one thing on his notes that I have to do. Elected officials of the North Shore Elder Services, myself, I'm the chair, the vice chair is Joanne Woldridge, the treasurer is Kathy Burns, the assistant treasurer is Bob Holloway, clerk is Allian Riviera, and the assistant clerk is Bob Holloway. Re-elected as members of the board of directors for 3-year terms is Carol Torres of Marblehead, and new members for the 3-year terms of Marjorie Leonard out of Danvers, Richard Muzzy of Danvers, Barry Sinwitz of Peabody, and Clark Wilmot of Marblehead. Elected for 2 years to fill an unexpired term was Donald Thomas of Danvers. We're all the members of the North Shore Elder Services Board of Directors. Please stand up and be recognized. I know there's a couple of you in here. We appreciate your willingness to help North Shore Elder Services in our mission to make life easier for older adults, their families, and their caregivers. And now I'm going to turn it over to podium to Executive Director Paul Zinkos.
Thank you very much, Joe. Before I have the pleasure of introducing Barbara, I'd like to acknowledge a few folks in the room. Joe Topolo, who's the Assistant Director in the office of Senator Bruce Todd. This is the second time that we've seen Joe this week. He was with us on Wednesday morning when we were saluting all the social workers in our agency and throughout the Aging Services Network as part of our celebration of National Social Workers Month. Jason Silva, who is Chief of Staff to Senator John Lovely. And in his own right, he's also my city councilor in the city of Evelyn. Then we have Assistant Secretary Carol Malone from the Executive Office of And it's within the network we have, where's Dan Lee? Dan sitting right next to John Ford, is Dan O'Leary, who is the Executive Director of Vista Valley. I want to thank Dan for coming this afternoon. Also want to recognize our community partner in the city of Salem, Patricia Zados. Patricia, stand up. And the reason I'm calling Patricia out because she's taken it upon herself. She's got other people helping her. She's gathered people, but she's spearheaded the effort in the city of Salem to achieve designation under the World Health Organization as an age-friendly city. And she was one of the first in the Commonwealth to get so designated. And she's now taken it up to the next level. So congratulations, Patricia. We're glad we're one of your partners in that effort. And I also want to thank Ledgewood Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Bentley for their sponsorship and part of today's luncheon. Now, for our keynote speaker, prior to her election to the House of Representatives back in 2003, she doesn't look old enough to have been elected in 2003. Barbara Italian worked for us. She's one of us. She worked for Elder Services in Merrimack Valley as a case manager, and she also worked for the Greater Lawrence Psychological Center, which back then was running the overnight abuse hotline. She also worked in what was then West Suburban Elder Services, now known as Springwell, another aging services access point that serves the Metro West area. And there she was a supervisor of case management and elder abuse. So I don't know if that's about the title, but I don't think you supervise elder abuse. I think you serve people who are protecting people from elder abuse. Barbara also, so she was first elected in 2003 to the 18th Essex District, which is in Merrimack Valley, just to our north. And during her tenure, she was the lead sponsor of landmark legislation for autism insurance coverage, which requires now insurance companies in Massachusetts to provide broad coverage of evidence-based, medically necessary autism therapies. And prior to that, it was very much hit and miss. In 2011, she became Director of Government Affairs in the Office of State Treasurer and Receiver General Steve Grossman. And then she went back into elected office in 2014, being elected this time to the Massachusetts Senate. And we're very pleased that Stan Rosenberg, who's the Senate President, I've known Stan since way back in the early 80s when we worked together on the Frau campaign, that he saw fit to appoint Barbara as the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Elder Affairs. And she talk about a champion's champion. Because throughout her life, she has been there for the rights and needs of older adults and persons with disabilities. I truly can think of no more appropriate and effective person in this role than Barbara Italian. So please join me in welcoming How long do we want to speak? 2 hours? The podium is yours.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to come out from in front of the podium. Very nice to meet all of you. I live in Andover, so not so far away. I think the last time I was in this building, in this room, literally, was when the years between the state treasurer and the Senate, I spent 2 years working for the ARC of Massachusetts, doing all of their disability policy and advocacy, back when I was chairing the Autism Commission. And I think I was here for Northeast ARC's fundraiser, so I've been here before. And my son used to go to a program called the Academy that used to be just up at the end of Centennial back in the mid-90s. It was a social skills group for kids with autism. So yes, I worked at Elder Services. If you back it up a little bit, I worked at a nursing home when I was in my gap year between high school and college. I did home health aid work to get myself through college, working for a private agency in Methuen called Nursing Services. I worked for Roseanne DiStefano, the Director of Elder Services, first as a case manager, and then in the adult family care program. And for those of you who know Ann Crowley, who was the second in charge at Elder Services Merrimack Valley, she was my boss back then, and that was the beginnings of sort of this concept of integrated management. So I was part of a team where I was the case manager. There was an OT, there was a nurse, and then there was Ann Crowley as my supervisor. At the same time, I did literally bring myself at 11 o'clock at night to downtown Lawrence, got locked in to the psych center to field the phone calls for the Elder Abuse Hotline for a couple of years. Went off to Philadelphia when I got married, worked for Philadelphia Corporation for Aging, doing essentially their foster care program in downtown Philly, and then came back and worked at West Suburban Elder Services, doing case management supervision, carrying the beeper at times for the protective services issues that came up on nights and weekends. And so I have a grounding, right, in what you all do. I respect and admire the work that all of you do. Happened to decide to run for office in 2003, and really my two main influences and motivations for running for office were my experience as within the home care program, and also my experiences as the mother of one of my 4 children who has autism. So in the 13 years that I was home raising those 4 children, there was very little available for folks with autism. In fact, I know Chris from his work with the Flutie Foundation. You know, I became a really strong advocate. So I was able to sort of marry up my advocacy skills and my social work skills from being in elder services with the needs for my son and others. So when I decided to run for office, it just seemed like a natural to run, regardless of the fact that I'd never served in public office before. So joining up with folks that are way smarter than myself, all of you and collectively within the home care agencies, working with Al Norman, working with Jack Hall, who is the lobbyist in Boston, working with folks like Senator Sue Tucker. I know Kara Malone served with Sue Tucker when I was in the House. Sue was the state senator for my area, and working in concert with Sue and others like Mike Festa, you know, really tried to push home this concept of community-based care as being more cost-effective, more compassionate. And working on the Choices Bill, working on the Care in Homes piece. You know, I had a good grounding when I was in the House working on this stuff. Helped run the Elder Caucus with Pat Jalen when we were both House members. So when you fast forward, when I entered the Senate 2 years ago, I became the vice chair of the Elder Affairs Committee, and it really does feel like going full circle now that I am chairing Elder Affairs. So what I bring to the job and what I hope to bring is a good working knowledge of the home care system, a pretty good working knowledge of the nursing home system as well. My mom was a client at Elder Services Merrimack Valley for a couple of years. She was a respite client because she would have been over income for the home care program, but she lived with me and my family for 20 years. And when she started presenting with dementia at around the time she turned 85, you know, we knew that we needed more help. And so she ended up becoming an adult health client over at Spectrum in North Andover. And I know there's a wonderful one in Beverly as well, both operated by the same group. I think it's Leahy still. So my mom was a 5-day-a-week adult health client. And she was she attended. We could have paid privately, but I really wanted her to have an elder service component. So she had a case manager, and she came in under the respite program. That program gave me the opportunity to work. Otherwise, I would have had to stay home, right? It also enabled us to keep her home in the community for 2 additional years that otherwise she would have had to go, somewhere else. So I am very aware of what the adult healths do as well. My mom is now in an assisted living for memory care in North Andover, and that's a great fit for her. When I realized that she needed something more structured than what I had, because I had the adult day health, and then I had a number of my family members each take a working day of the week to come in from 5 to 8, so that we could all work, and then we had paid private overnight care. But that was becoming difficult for my children as my mom was getting more and more anxious at night and sundowning and trying to run out the door to find her mother. We all know those stories, right? So then, when I was looking at what the next step was for her, it became this memory care unit, because what she needs really is structure and activities and routine, predictability. She did not need a nursing home. Her hands-on care needs were really not skilled nursing needs. They were really, she needs someone to make her feel a part of something. And it was actually not a bad transition from the adult day health to go into the memory care unit. So I really have a pretty good sense of what is out there, within the continuum of services offered for folks who are older. I just came from the Northeast Independent Living Program Advocacy Day, which is an annual event at the Mass School of Law. And what I said to them is the same thing I'll say to all of you. The needs of those with disabilities and those that are elderly are pretty much the same, right? Everybody wants community-based care. They want to be in the least restrictive setting. They want to, they do not want to be in a nursing home. But with that, we need to fund a robust community-based services program. The concerns that I see over the last couple of years, and this is prior to whatever's going to happen today, right? Whatever craziness is going to come out of Washington today in particular and over the next couple of years, is that we are slowly choking off some of the services that you also contract with at Elder Services that allow people to thrive in the community. So we are either level funding or cutting the reimbursement Medicaid rates for things like adult day health, our home health aides, our VNAs. We are slowly but surely really either level or cutting all of these options. And so, as we again have the population shift and get older, there are real challenges here. If these wonderful programs that we know work, right? If they can't keep the doors open, it's only going to make your job even harder, right? If we're churning through home health aides, homemakers, and case managers because they're not being paid a livable wage, what is that going to do to community-based services as we know them? So I've been asked to lead on a piece of legislation that is called Enough Pay to Stay. And the concept is to try to boost the wages, again, of the home health aides, the homemakers, and the case managers so that we can have a robust system where people aren't leaving the system because they can't afford to keep a roof over their head doing the incredibly important work that they do. So that is something that we're trying to address in this year's budget. There's a little bit of money left from the Balancing Incentives Program grant that was written by and large by Executive Office of Elder Affairs, a woman named Sue Kemper that was the executive director at Springwell that ironically was my colleague as a case management supervisor back in 1987. So that allowed for additional federal match money that comes back from the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. I think it was about 2%, but it gave a bit of a boost of money, and it was aimed to go and fund underserved populations in long-term care services. And so there's a little bit of money left in that account, and we're trying to have that be allocated into, again, this concept, at least as a one-timer, if not, ongoing, but to give a little bit more money to the workers that are the backbone of the services that are happening at all the home care agencies throughout the state. So we'll see what happens in our budget, but that was one of the things that I made as a pitch. We decided to really have home care, the Home Care Aid Council and the home health aid folks all work together and coordinate together. This concept of fighting over limited resources doesn't get anyone where they need to be. So the three groups are working as one, which I think is really critically important to see what we can do to sustain and inject a little bit more funds into that program. So I'm hopeful that that will happen during our budget this time around. This is a pot of money that has to be used by the end of September, and this is money that cannot be used to replenish anything that was cut by the governor in the 9C cuts. So for example, it could not go to bring back the monies that were cut from the adult foster care programs throughout the state. So again, I have a pretty good working knowledge of what goes on in elder services throughout the state. I also have a sister who just turned 60 last October, who is really someone who's facing a very uncertain future as a consumer because she happened to sell her home in Haverhill and move up to New Hampshire. She lives in Hampton Beach, and she's had diabetes for over 4 decades. It's caused systemic damage. She's now pretty much wheelchair bound and happened to fall and break a number of things on her right side about a month ago. So she got the acute care. She went to a great rehab hospital up in Portsmouth. She's currently in extended rehab in North Andover at Edgewood because I was able to kind of get that to happen for her. But when she goes back to New Hampshire next Friday, she's going to have a very limited array of services. She's going to get whatever, she'll get Meals on Wheels, and she'll get some very short-term VNA intervention for a couple of weeks, right? But there's no home care program as we know it here in Massachusetts, up in the state of New Hampshire. So you get what you pay for, right? We don't have a robust elder services system in New Hampshire. And I think that's sort of an allegory for what's going on within healthcare throughout the whole country. There are some states that are going to pull out of whatever may come down in way of changes to Medicare, to Medicaid, to healthcare coverage in general. Some states are going to really make this a priority. I believe Massachusetts will. And other states, heaven help those folks that are seniors, that have disabilities, etc., that are low income. I don't know what's going to happen to those folks. I feel like we collectively in Massachusetts are in a real defensive posture right now. We know shoes are going to drop. We don't know to what extent the impacts are going to be on us. We are highly dependent right now. Our healthcare system is highly dependent on Medicaid funding and that match money that comes in and funds large parts of the general fund, the budget, the state budget. So we know bad stuff is coming. We don't know to what extent, but I do believe there is a commitment within the state of Massachusetts that is bipartisan, as evidenced by Governor Baker, saying what these cuts would mean going forward to Massachusetts starting in 2020, starting at $1 billion and going up from there if they tinker with the Medicaid program. So I think we will come out of this better than other states, but that said, there'll be all sorts of fights ahead, folks. And so I know that your agency works, if you are elder services or if you are one of the subcontracting agencies here, you all have groups that organize and come in and lobby all of us, and that's great, but I will tell you the same thing I used to tell Merrimack Valley. When times get tough and we're talking about direct budgetary cuts with real implications for your agency, rather than sending a cut and paste email, which the elder world loves to do, just a quick blurb about a client and what this would mean to them if their services got taken away, or what it means to go out on a home visit and have to put somebody on a wait list, is compelling. If you paint a picture of someone, right, where services are working well or where the lack of services, what the impacts are, that is far more constructive than sending a cut and paste email, because I probably get 200 plus emails a day, okay? And the ones that I remember, aren't the cut and paste, ASAP driven emails, or other groups too. I'm not picking on the ASAP. Other groups too. Give us a little snapshot of someone you just went to visit and what it means for them to have case management supervision or to have a nursing component, or if you work for a VNA, what it means when the rates get leveled or cut, right? What does that mean in real terms to the services you can provide to people? In my mind, that's the most effective way that you can advocate. And in those 2 years when I worked for the Arc of Mass, that's really what I did. I went around the whole state and taught parents and siblings and self-advocates within the disability community that sharing stories and vignettes is the most powerful thing that you can do. Because, what you need is very different from what a whole bunch of other very deserving groups need within our state budget. And there's all sorts of competing interest, and there will be even more so if we have to lock a 40th of our budget off, because of the healthcare piece. And there are obviously other implications as well that may be coming down the pipe. So I really want you to stay actively engaged. Know who your legislators are, okay? Joan Lovely, a fantastic state senator with me. Jason is here. Make sure you know who your state senator is. Make sure Bruce Tarr's office is here. Make sure you know who your state rep is, your state senator, and be in communication with them. Be a source of information for us. Be your expert in the field that can share information with what the impacts will be on things. Yesterday, we passed a supplemental budget, and it's a great thing that they restored some money to the program to eliminate wait lists, but they also wanted transferability, and they didn't get that piece. So there are always going to be issues that are going to arise. There are always going to be challenges, budgetarily and legislatively, and the only way those things get brought to the forefront is if you share your information and your needs with your elected officials. So I'm really looking forward to chairing Elder Affairs. I think that there are a lot of things that we could do a whole lot better. As the daughter of someone with dementia, I feel like we have just an exploding problem, right, with Alzheimer's and other dementias. I've experienced that as a consumer, and what it's like when my mom hits the emergency room, and if you don't stay with her, or if they don't put a sitter in that room, what happens? Because she doesn't know why she's there and doesn't want to be there and can get very anxious and agitated, etc., and it just goes downhill, right? So I've seen it from the lens as a legislator, but also as a daughter and a caregiver. And so, I really look forward to the hearings that we're going to have on some, and the discussions that we're going to have. I serve on healthcare finance, which is important to note as well, because healthcare finance is the next step above any legislation that makes it through the Elder Affairs Committee. So if you think about it, there's Children and Families and People with Disabilities is one committee, Elder Affairs is another committee, and Public Health is another, right? And they all sort of, in a way, have nexus with seniors, right, and folks with disabilities. If anything gets through those committees and is successful, it's then got to go to healthcare finance. It's the next step, because most of these things cost money. They impinge on the budget, and so it's really a two-step process. You not only have to get it through Elder Affairs, you've got to get it through healthcare finance. So I'm on that committee as well, purposefully, because I attend every one of those hearings, because I want to build up goodwill with my chairman of that committee, so that when some of my elder stuff and some of my disability stuff comes to him, I can help continue to make it on its way to, consideration and potentially happening either as legislation or in the budget. So, I'm really looking forward to chairing my committee. My co-chair in the House is brand new as well. Her name is Danielle Gregoire, and she is from Marlborough, and she's never chaired a committee before, and this is not an area of her expertise. So many, many people are meeting with her, bringing her up to speed, closing her knowledge gap. I think she'll be great. She worked with me on a lot of autism stuff, and she's got a good heart, and I think that's half the battle, is when someone really wants to do good things for people and is willing to think beyond dollars and cents, but impacts of real people. And so I think she has that. I'm really hopeful that we might do an omnibus elder bill this session. That hasn't been done in a very, very long time. And so I'm hoping that we can move the needle on a number of different issues, for seniors, perhaps with regards to, one of the things I worked on the last session was trying to raise the qualifier under home care, and I know some of that has been changed in the regulations over at Elder Affairs, but trying to sort of help those folks that I feel the worst for, that are just a shade above the income qualifiers and so cannot enter the home care program. What happens to those people, right? People that are wealthy can figure it out, they can pay privately, but those people that are just a shade above and we still want them to stay in their homes, what happens to them? So We've done a lot of work over the last 2 years on that. I hope to do more work on that. Hope to again do a lot of work around this whole issue of enough pay to stay among the workers. Hope to do a little bit, we got a little bit of funding for the Alzheimer's Association in last year's budget. Hoping to do some more working with them on that whole issue of Alzheimer's and how we can help support the individuals and their families. We have issues around assisted living and around nursing home and the whole adult day health, the whole system, right? We have to look at all of it. Barry Bluestone came in. He's a noted professor at Northeastern, talking about what the shifts are going to be in population and also what the needs are going to be for jobs. And not surprising any of you, at the top level we know there'll be these fancy technologically and science and math driven jobs, but the other growth field really is going to be within healthcare, within home health aides, personal care attendants, etc. And so how we match up what we're going to need as a state and fund those and prioritize those so that we can have that happen as our population shifts and becomes older is going to be a really important thing to do. So happy to be here. I don't know if you want me to take questions, but I'm really looking forward to working with and serving with all of you. Thank you so much.
Any questions for Senator Natalia? Myrna. Oh, you're in trouble now.
Okay.
Now, I was listening to you, and I'm very impressed, by the way. Everything that you said is really awesome. But as someone in the media, PR kind of thing, I was thinking when you were talking about some of these people who want to, these stories, the personal touches kind of thing, I was thinking there are so many areas that, and so many people who would be eloquent enough to share their story. I think we need to send some of these people out into the community, like Kiwanis and Rotary and Lions Clubs, library, when they have a speakers night. I think there are so many places that would really appreciate hearing what this is all about. Especially, most of these people, even the younger ones, have parents that are entering that particular stage where they're going to have to know about these things. So I really think more PR in the communities would kind of help.
I think it's an excellent suggestion. I agree with you that there are many people that don't want to think about or deal with the concept of aging because it's really facing down your own mortality, right? But as our population is shifting, or as people get what I am, which is really the sandwich generation, I think we have more and more people that want to understand where to turn for help, what to do. I mean, I was out at a private corporation called Schneider in Andover 2 weeks ago, and they're telling me about all their wonderful advances in green energy and energy self-sufficiency and all that. And when they asked me to speak, really the questions that came back were, my parent is struggling, what do? I gave out 1-800-AGE-INFO, you're right. I mean, there are so many people that, have to confront what they're going to do either for themselves, for their family, for their parents. We need to have these conversations. The whole reason I really got interested in working at Elder Services, I was a poli-sci major, but my mom was one of 7 children. Their dad died fairly young, pre-Social Security days. So what happened? Good Irish family. Most of the kids gave up their hopes and dreams, stayed at home, and all lived in the home they grew up in to take care of their mother. Now my mom was the youngest, so she left and she got married. But she had all these aging siblings, and there was 24 years difference between her and her oldest sibling. So I'm a teenager, and they're really my proxy grandparents. And so I got to know all of them and love them, and they came to my graduations and my birthday parties, and they'd slip you a $5 bill on your birthday. Back when $5 was a lot, right, in the 60s and 70s. But they all, one by one, during the 80s, started aging, started having issues, and we all really got actively involved in helping them to age in place. 2 of my sisters and I would go and clean their house every other weekend. We would go in and clean their house. buy their groceries, go to the medical supply store for them, you know. We did all that, so I grew up understanding it, the need, the want to do this for people. Most people have no idea until they're thrown into the situation, you know. And again, I do, and I know the Aging and Disability Resource Centers do try to combine the needs of disability and aging, because again, living both lives, right, with my mom with dementia, my autistic son, and now my 60-year-old sister that I'm really gonna be her case manager for, because she doesn't have children and she really needs me. You know, we need to be pulling in the same direction, the disabled community and the aging community. We all want the same thing. We all need a robust community-based system that is highly dependent on Mass Health and Medicare funding. And we need to fight back and say this is wrong, as they try to kind of take this stuff away and blithely say that Meals on Wheels aren't a requirement, is a nice to do in some states that decide to do it. We gotta push back. And, you know, I think we're gonna have a giant fight on our hands for the next couple of years with this stuff. You know, all of our Medicaid waivers, we want to expand these waivers. You know, we don't want to worry about if they're going to continue to exist. So it's really a combination of sort of sharing the stories and how we got to where we are and why we need to keep that stuff. So some of it's political, without a doubt, without being partisan, but some of it's just, you know, appealing to the better angels in all of us, that we all want to believe that in this country, our seniors are going to be taken care of. And we don't want to believe that those who have the means are going to get it, and the heck with everybody else, right? So I'm very passionate about it. And again, I guess my homework for all of you, if you haven't already figured this out, is to make sure you personally have a connection with your legislators. Not just Paul, don't leave it to Paul, don't leave it to your board. Go ask for coffee, go sit down with them and tell them what you do or what you need, and, you know, paint that picture for them. And I just have to say, again, Joe Berardino is awesome. Did he walk out?
He's there to pick up his daughter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've known Joe, he doesn't remember, but I've known him since 1999. We both were officials on the pool deck at our respective Ys, and he's a great guy, and I'm so happy to see he's back with you all. Thank you.
Lorna, you got any ideas how we can get some stories in the paper? But I will say before Carol asks her question.
You know, one of the things that struck me when we were talking about the Meals on Wheels specifically, has anybody done like demographics study, and you don't have to mention names, but say XYZ has limited income, and you can say like $20,000 a year, and without Meals on Wheels would starve to death. I mean, you take, there are some people that, I mean, some of the stories have to be pretty bad. So if somebody could, in each community.
Well, actually, if you read the Danvers Herald this week, there's a front page story, the big picture. In fact, all the weeklies throughout the region have a front page story featuring the importance of Meals on Wheels. So we thank Gatehouse Media for that coverage.
It had nothing to do with that. I'm just talking, you know, let's get, you know, the things in black and white, say, look at these people, this is what you're going to do with them. You're going to starve them. So let's.
And I just want to add 2 footnotes, Barbara. To your point about telling the story is very important. Now, I personally don't take Al Norman's emails and pen and paste. I'm always trying to elaborate. And what I am going to do is actually make them even more personalized. Because we've been creating a weekly series of blogs featuring our clients now for well over a year. So we got great vignettes. So I'm going to start incorporating those.
That's
I
so much more effective. And I
absolutely
told this to Al's face, so don't think I'm telling
Well,
Joe.
we call it the Al's
Yeah.
face too.
Yeah.
And I will say, because I'm looking around the room, there's a lot of staff here. They're really terrific advocates. First of all, we have a wonderful legislative delegation here in New Hampshire.
Right.
Second to none, even better than Merrimack Valley, with the exception of you, of course. And because when we put the call out, they do personally connect with their state senators and representatives, and they are representatives quite responsive, so you can rely on them to back, you know, especially if you get an omnibus bill underway. So Carol.
Yes, thank you. I'm Carol Holmes,
before you sit down, and I should have recognized and thanked you earlier on, because yesterday the legislature passed the supplemental funding for home care. It was a little under $5 million, and you're absolutely correct. If that didn't happen, we would be instituting a wait list for some home care programs for the balance of the fiscal year. And this is, as you recognize, this is not an expenditure, but rather an investment in very necessary services that are improving the quality of life and also foregoing even more expensive facility-based care. So I'm glad the legislature and the governor are getting it, and that we have folks like you advocating. This has nothing to do with the fact that the supplement passed yesterday. This is just a little token for you being with us today.
Thank you. Do you want me to open it?
Sure.
The power of kindness, the unexpected benefits of leading a compassionate life. Thank you very much.
Well, Joe had to leave because his granddaughter was waiting at the curbside at the elementary school for him to pick her up. So he was going to bring the 20th annual meeting of North Shore Health Services to a close. So do I have a motion to adjourn? One of our directors. Do we have a second? Okay. And all the directors in favor? Aye. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody in the room, because we together are pursuing the model we have at North Shore Health Services for all older adults and their families and caregivers, making life easier. None of us can do it alone. We do it together, and we're very fortunate to be working with you all. And thank you for your support. And take care and have a good spring. Thank you. Go Red Sox!